So for scripture, I'm going to read Psalm 91, which is known as the Soldier's Psalm. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. If you say, "The Lord is my refuge," and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you, no disaster will come near your tent. For He will command His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Because He loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue Him. I will protect Him, for He acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer Him. I will be with Him in trouble. I will deliver Him and honor Him. With long life I will satisfy Him and show Him my salvation. I bet I forgot to turn this on, didn't I? Yep. Oh well, you could hear me. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today, although I'm rather intimidated whenever asked to fill in as a speaker for a message or sermon. I truly don't feel like I have any great insights or any deep thoughts, as they say. But we're at Memorial Day weekend, and since I love history and it fascinates me, I'm going to mention some men that gave of themselves in service to their country in a time of war and of their faith in Jesus. And I thought of a little phrase when I tried to come up with a sermon, to quote Edgar Allan Poe, but not really quote, kind of paraphrase. While I pondered, weak and weary, how to make a sermon dreary, and to make the people teary, quoth the deacon, not likely. The question about Christians serving in the military roles has been a point of contention since the first Christians served in Rome, in the Roman army. Whether or not a person can serve in the military and still maintain their faith has always vexed us since the very beginning. God calls for us not to kill, and Jesus says to turn the other cheek, but the history of God's chosen people is full of men of God having to step up and serve militarily. It didn't go. There we go. John the Baptizer did not tell repentant soldiers to leave the army, but rather he asked them not to exploit people and to be content with their pay, to not bully the people that they are around. And our forefathers had to make some of these choices about rebellion and service, to kill or not to kill, in service to their country and to their countrymen. Here are some of those stories from our history. Please feel free to fall asleep if you have to. First up, we have Robert. He was born on January 18th, 1807, on a plantation in Westmoreland County in Virginia. Robert's father ended up in debtor's prison when Robert was very young. And after getting out, his father moved away to the East Indies, leaving the family behind and in very dire straits. Robert was raised as a Christian, although he was not formally confirmed until he was 46 years old. And Robert had a definite aptitude for mathematics when he was in school. The family had to be supported financially by very kind relatives, And it was the urging of these relatives that Robert, and through the help of his uncle, was by reaching out to John Calhoun, the Secretary of War, Robert was allowed to attend West Point Academy, the military academy. And while at West Point, he earned no demerits of any kind, which is amazing, during his 4 years that he was there. And he graduated second in his class, you'd think he'd be first, in 1829. At that point, he was commissioned into the U.S. Army as a brevet lieutenant, and he served the Army Corps of Engineers all across the young United States. And it was while he was at West Point that he met and eventually married his bride Mary. And through the years, they raised 7 children, 4 daughters and 3 sons. Now, Robert had a distinguished career in the Army, including leading men in battle in the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848, and he was appointed the superintendent of West Point while he was still in the Army. Robert served with distinction for 32 years until something happened in 1861. Anybody got an idea what that might have been? Yes, the Civil War. Yes, we're talking about Robert E. Lee, in case you weren't sure who I was talking about. He was offered the command of the Union Army at the very beginning of the Civil War, or as some like to call it, the War of Northern Aggression. But when his home state of Virginia decided to follow the other southern states into secession, he quietly declined the offer and resigned his commission in the Army. Thus ends the 32 years of service, to the U.S. Army anyway. Lee believed that slavery was a moral and political evil, but it was unthinkable for him to think of raising his hand against his home country, which to him was his state, Virginia. So he sided with the South. Now, unlike many former soldiers, Robert E. Lee did not think that the war would be quick and glorious. He knew that it would be a long and bloody nightmare. He was right, of course. At first, he was just an advisor to Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, but later he was given command of the Army of Northern Virginia, if this will go, there we go. He led this from June of 1862 until the end of the war, and he was an incredible tactician and strategist, winning many battles against superior forces, sometimes being outnumbered more than 2 to 1, and breaking a lot of the rules on the way by the dividing your forces in the face of the enemy and things like that, and still winning. On February 6th, 1865, he was appointed Commander-in-Chief of all Confederate forces, but by then it was too late. It was all but over. On April 9th, 1865, with his army surrounded by Union forces, General Robert E. Lee surrendered the Army of Northern Virginia to General Ulysses S. Grant to save as many lives in the end as he could. Many of his officers and men wanted to fight on, but Lee understood that there was no longer any hope of victory. He was a devout Christian man who never shirked from talking about his faith in Jesus, praying for his country and his men, sometimes for his enemies, and letting his faith help him in making his decisions. His faith, demonstrated in his leadership, is credited with keeping the Confederate Army from looting and pillaging when they invaded the North twice during his tenure as their commanding officer. You might notice the other bearded man in this picture. That's Thomas Jackson, also known as Stonewall Jackson. He was once quoted as saying, "Whether at home in my bed or on the battlefield, I am perfectly at peace, knowing that I am in the hands of the Lord God." He was another devout Christian man, and he gave his life for his country. Interestingly, he was wounded in battle, so he was almost killed on the field, and then he died in his bed a few days later. So kind of both things happened. Following the war, Robert E. Lee was indicted for treason, but he was not tried. He was stripped of his citizenship and not allowed to ever vote again. He urged the Southerners not to try to resume the war. and rather he pressed for reconciliation with the North. He sincerely wished to retire to his family plantation, but that was not possible because it had been taken from him to make a cemetery, which is now Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia, where John F. Kennedy and many others are buried. In October of 1865, having been neither pardoned for his part in the war nor ever given back his citizenship, Lee accepted the position as president of the Washington College in Lexington, Virginia. He served there until his death on October 12, 1870. The university, or the college, was later renamed the Washington and Lee University. He was 63 years old when he died, excuse me, and he died one of the most beloved, and in some ways despised, generals in American history, and certainly one of the greatest. It was said of Lee, he was a foe without hate, a friend without treachery, a soldier without cruelty, a victor without oppression, and a victim without murmuring. He was a public officer without vices, a private citizen without wrong, a neighbor without reproach, a Christian without hypocrisy, and a man without guile. I wish the same could be said of more of us, myself included. Next up we have Alvin. No, not Alvin the Chipmunk. Alvin was born on December 13th of 1887 in a two-room log cabin in Fentress County, Tennessee, another Southerner. He was the third child of 11 that were born to his parents. His family was poverty-stricken, and his father died in November of 1911. Alvin, then 24, was the oldest child still living at home since his two oldest brothers had married and moved away. So Alvin did his best to help his mother raise the other 8 children. To supplement the farm income, Alvin worked in railroad construction and as a logger. By all accounts, he was a skilled laborer, and he was devoted to the welfare of his family. He was a crack shot with a rifle, winning many shooting contests, and he was able to hit small targets very easily. He was also known to be out drinking and carousing a lot, quite often. He had one wild reputation. He was often found fighting in the local saloons, and in one such fight his best friend was killed. His mother, a pacifist Protestant, tried to convince him to change his ways. Now, even though he was out there often drunk and fighting in saloons, Alvin was always in church on Sunday mornings. Just not letting it sink in, apparently. He was often leading the hymn singing. And on one revival meeting at the end of 1914, that eventually led to his conversion experience on January 1st of 1915. His church was the Church of Christ in Christian Union, and although the church itself was not a pacifist sect, it had been opposed to slavery, it had opposed the Civil War, and it basically was, kind of not wanting to have military indoctrination or service, if possible. Alvin became a changed man and a pacifist, from being a drunk fighting man to a pacifist. Wow. On June 5th, 1917, at the age of 29, Alvin registered for the draft, but on the form, when it asked if he was seeking an exemption, he wrote, "Yes, I don't want to fight." But he was drafted in November of 1917, and his initial claim of conscientious objector was rejected. Now, he did appeal that decision, but just being a conscientious objector did not exempt you from military service. So you were still put in the army, but in non-combat situations, allowed to serve in many other ways. So he was in the army now. Later in life, Alvin said that his initial reaction to being drafted was to worry. He said, "I did not want to go fight. I did not want to go kill. I believed in the Bible." Once he was in the Army, he was placed in Company G, the 328th Infantry, 82nd Division, and he was struggling with the idea of fighting and killing. He met with his company commander, Captain Edward Danforth, and his battalion commander, Major Edward Buxton,
Both were devout Christian men who listed a few biblical phrases or quotes to Alvin, such as, "He that hath no sword, let him sell his cloak and buy one," or "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's," or "If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight." Alvin was then given a 10-day furlough to go home and think it over. In the end, Alvin decided that he could and would fight if he was called upon to do so. He ended up going to war in Europe in the war to end all wars. Yeah, right. The World War I, of course. Fast forward now to October 8th of 1918. Alvin York was his name. His battalion was ordered to assault Hill 223 along, I'm going to butcher this name, I know it, the Decauville Road north of Châtel-Chehery, France. Hopefully I didn't butcher it too bad. Alvin later said, and I'll do this in a southern accent, "The Germans got us, and they got us right smart. They just stopped us dead in our tracks. Their machine guns were up there on the heights overlooking us and well hidden, and we couldn't tell for certain where the terrible heavy fire was coming from. And I'm telling you, they were shooting straight. Our boys went down like the long grass before the mowing machine at home. Our attack just faded out, and there we were lying down about halfway across the valley. And those German machine guns and big shells were getting us hard." I don't know if he actually had a southern accent, but he's from Tennessee, so. At this point, Corporal York was assigned as part of a 17-man platoon that was sent to infiltrate the German lines, if possible, and see what could be done. They were able to get behind the German lines, but a machine gunner found them and cut down 9 of the 17 men, killing 6 of them. All the other NCOs, the non-commissioned officers, were hit, so York took charge of the unit, and he was in a position to see most of the Germans. He began shooting them one at a time, even as they tried desperately to kill him, to find and kill him. He said that if 6 Germans would get up and charge at him, he would shoot the ones in back first, so that the ones in front would not stop and to take time to aim at him accurately. He learned that in the hills of Tennessee, apparently, doing hunting. And at times, he would gobble like a turkey, and when the Germans would pop their head up, he would shoot them. All the while, he was yelling for the Germans to surrender because he did not want to kill anyone. In the end, the German officer in charge, after trying repeatedly to get at Corporal York, offered the German surrender. In the end, York and the 7 remaining men marched the captured Germans back to Allied lines. Brigadier General Julian Lindsay, seeing the procession, said to York, "I see that you have captured the whole German army." To which Alvin replied, "No, sir, I only got 132 here." Wow, that's the prisoners. York's action silenced the German machine gun batteries, and the assault was a success. Alvin York received the Distinguished Service Cross and was promoted to sergeant. Yes, Sergeant York. Later, when they investigated what they had done, they upgraded his medal to the Medal of Honor, the highest decoration in the U.S. military. His Medal of Honor citation reads, "After his platoon suffered heavy casualties and 3 other non-commissioned officers had become casualties, Corporal York assumed command, fearlessly leading 7 men. He charged with great daring a machine gun nest, which was pouring deadly and incessant fire on his platoon. In this heroic feat, the machine gun nest was taken, together with 4 officers, 128, and several guns. When asked about it later, York said, "A higher power than man guided and watched over me and told me what to do." Now, his heroics went largely unknown in the U.S. for about 6 months, until April 26, 1919. His story was published in the Saturday Evening Post. At that point, he was given a ticker tape parade in New York City and offered all kinds of perks, but in the end, Alvin returned to Tennessee, where he took up farming again. He turned down offers of up to $30,000, which in today's money would be over $500,000. to come and be a celebrity, to perform in vaudeville, etc., etc. But in the end, he chose to come home to Tennessee. And after he mustered out of the Army in late May 1919, he returned home, and having been there for only a few days, he married his sweetheart, Gracie Loretta Williams, on June 7th of 1919. They were married by the governor of Tennessee, Albert H. Roberts. Alvin and Gracie had 10 children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. Unfortunately, one infant son died at 4 days old. One infant daughter died the same day that she was born, and one son died at 1 year of age. The other 7 children lived to adulthood. The last one, Andrew Jackson York, passed away in 2022. Many of their children were named for famous people, and 2 of the sons were named after those 2 officers that had so profoundly affected him. Interestingly, Alvin re-enlisted in World War II, wanting to fight again, I guess. But he was 54 years old. He was overweight and diabetic, or partially diabetic, pretty rough shape. So they didn't allow him into combat, but instead made him a major in the Army Signal Corps, doing bond drives and touring around the country. He rose to the rank of colonel, but almost was always referred to as Sergeant York. Yes, there is a movie about him starring Gary Cooper. Alvin died on September 2nd, 1964 at age 76. Gracie died in 1984. Alvin had lived a good and patriotic life right to the very end. Next, I want to talk about Louis. Louis, that picture of him looks very much like my dad, although his hair is darker than my dad. He looks an awful lot like him. Wow. Louis was born in Olean, New York, a Yankee this time, on January 26, 1917. His family moved from New York to Long Beach, California, when he was just 2 years old. He had 1 older brother and 2 younger sisters, and he was raised in a devout Catholic home, but regardless, by the age of 5, he was smoking. 5. And by 8 years old, he was drinking. Yeah, really good start. In his youth, he almost died twice, once in a house fire, and once when he fell into an oil rig, where he almost drowned. His brother Pete, trying to save his life apparently, talked him into trying out for track and field, and Louis eventually became a natural. At first, he lost the races that he was entered in, but Pete worked with him, and Louis got faster and faster. Eventually, he took up distance running, and by the time he was in 9th grade, a freshman, he finished 5th in the all-city, now we're talking Los Angeles here, area, the 600-meter dash. Pete then convinced him that if he wanted to do better, he should stop drinking and smoking. Wow. Which he did, and he became a fanatical runner. He went undefeated throughout high school, and in 1934, Louis set a national record for the 1-mile run, 4 minutes and 21.3 seconds. I might be able to do that on a bicycle, going downhill all the way with the tailwind. In 1936, he tried out for the Olympic team, but there was fierce competition in the 1,500-meter race, so Louis switched to the 5,000-meter race. Yikes. It was very hot in New York that year, and several competitors collapsed from the heat, but Louis, with a mad sprint at the end, managed a dead heat tie with the American record holder in the 5,000 meters. That was Don Lash. Suffice to say, Louis was on the Olympic team. And at 19 years and 178 days old, he was and still is the youngest qualifying American for the 5,000 meters. At the Olympics in Germany in 1936, Louis finished 8th in the world in the 5,000 meters with a time of 14 minutes, 46.8 seconds, which may sound like a lot, but that was 24 seconds behind the Olympic record of 14 minutes, 22.2 seconds. His final lap was done in 56 seconds, which caught the eye of one certain leader of Germany, Adolf Hitler, who asked to meet Louis, saying, "Ah, you're the boy with the fast finish," or something of that nature. After the Olympics, Louis enrolled in college at USC, and in 1938 he set a national collegiate mile rate of 4 minutes and 8.3 seconds, in spite of having cuts to his shins from other runners trying to spike him. Wow. He was called the Torrance Tornado. Now, after graduating from USC in 1940, Louis Zamperini enlisted in the United States Army Air Corps as an aviation cadet in September of 1941. He didn't have long to wait. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant and posted to a bomber squadron in the South Pacific, where he would soon be at war. His squadron was to fly the B-24 Liberator bomber, and Louis was a bombardier on a B-24 named Superman. That means he was right up front in that glass housing at the front. His bomber, Superman, flew on a bombing raid on April 21st, 1943, on the Japanese-held island of Nauru, and his aircraft was attacked by 3 Zeros after the bomb run was completed. 5 of his crew were hit, and 1 later died, and Louis administered first aid all the way back to base, saving at least 2 of the men. When they got back, the ground crew later counted 594 holes in Superman that weren't there to start with. Here you can see Louis examining a 20 millimeter hit from a 20 millimeter cannon. You don't want those coming at you. After that, with Superman, the B-24, no longer airworthy, the remaining unwounded crew members were transferred temporarily to Hawaii. Yeah, tough duty, I know, but given a new, quote unquote, B-24 to fly, this one named Green Hornet. But Green Hornet was alleged by other crews to be a defective plane, a real lemon. So it proved to be true. In May 1943, while running in the sand on the beach, Louis ran a 4 minute and 12 second mile in the sand. He was fast. On May 27, 1943, Louis and his crew were assigned to search for a lost plane and crew while flying the mission. Mechanical failure caused the Green Hornet to crash into the sea, into the ocean 850 miles south of Hawaii. 8 of the 11 men on board were killed while ditching. The 3 survivors, Louis Zamperini, the pilot, his friend Russell Phillips, and Francis McNamara, ended up on a survival raft. The men drank what rainwater they could get and ate such raw fish as they could catch, and they were on the raft for 47 days. After 33 days, Francis McNamara died, and they wrapped up his body and dropped him overboard, a burial at sea. Louis and Russell remained on the raft for that total of 47 days when they managed to reach the Marshall Islands, which were, of course, held by the Japanese, and they immediately captured them. They were taken first to Kwajalein Atoll and later transferred to Ofuna, and eventually ended up in a POW camp in northern Japan, where they were not listed as POWs. They were starved, beaten, and tortured for the remainder of the war, and at one point they were marked to be executed rather than to be allowed to be rescued by the Americans. There was one guard that was particularly sadistic to them, and Louis helped the prisoners' morale by, I don't know how this worked, but by reciting Italian recipes from his mother. Although, to me, that would seem more like torture than anything if you can't eat the food that you're talking about. Since he was never listed as a POW, 1 year and 1 day after going missing, he was declared killed in action, and his family was notified. Imagine their surprise at the end of the war when he was found alive in a Japanese camp and brought home to a hero's welcome. That picture is of Louis Zamperini and Russell Phillips, the only 2 survivors from the Green Hornet bomber. Louis returned to California and to his family, to a hero's welcome, of course, and eventually he settled down and he married Cynthia Applewhite in 1946. Now, Louis suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. I just can't imagine why. and which sometimes caused him to lash out at Cynthia. At one point, he actually started choking her before he stopped himself. He became addicted to alcohol and had very serious nightmares about his time in prison camp. Can't imagine that either. I mean, wow. Cynthia began to think about filing for divorce, but she went to a Billy Graham crusade and gave her heart to Jesus and stayed with Louis. In 1949, Louis reluctantly agreed to attend a Billy Graham crusade, and Billy's preaching reminded Louis of the prayers he had offered while he was on that raft in the Pacific Ocean. He gave his heart to Christ, he forgave his former captors, and his nightmares ceased. Louis and Cynthia had 2 children, a daughter and a son. Billy Graham helped Louis to launch a new career as a Christian evangelist, and eventually he went back to Japan to preach the gospel. He eventually tried to reach out to the sadistic guard, but the guard refused to see him. He remained a faithful Christian evangelist for the rest of his life. Now get this. 4 days before his 81st birthday, Louis ran one of the legs in the Olympic torch relay in Nagano, Japan in 1998, at 81 years old, almost. His beloved wife Cynthia passed away in 2001, and Louis lived until July 2nd, 2014, when he died from pneumonia at the age of 97. His story is told in the film Unbroken, a movie produced about a book of the same name. Louis was unbroken and a good Christian man. Couple more to go. We'll get you out of here. Next up, we have Desmond. Desmond was born February 7th, 1919, in Lynchburg, Virginia. His father was a carpenter, his mother was a homemaker, and a shoe factory worker. Desmond's father had served in World War I. He had earned a Silver Star and was also suffering from PTSD from World War I. His mother raised Desmond as a devout Seventh-day Adventist and instilled in him Sabbath-keeping, non-violence, and vegetarianism. He had 1 brother and 1 sister, and he grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia. Desmond attended church school until at least the 8th grade, and then worked at the Lynchburg Lumber Company, and eventually he worked at the shipyards in Newport News, Virginia, before the outbreak of World War II. Now, interestingly, when the war came, Desmond chose to serve in the military, in the Army, in spite of being offered a deferment due to his shipyard work. And he was a pacifist, conscientious objector. He was sent to Fort Jackson in South Carolina, and he joined the 77th Infantry Division. He refused to carry a weapon of any kind due to his conscientious objector status, which was, of course, a result of his Christian faith. He was made a medic and assigned to the 2nd Platoon, Company B, 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry Regiment of the 77th Infantry Division. There'll be a quiz on that. Remember that now. Initially, he was unpopular because of his pacifist stance when we had been attacked by Japan. However, while serving on Guam and in the Philippines, Desmond was awarded the Silver Star twice for his exceptional valor in aiding wounded soldiers while under fire, all the while not carrying a weapon of any kind. And it was during the battle for Okinawa that Desmond Doss, that's his name, accomplished incredible feats of courage under fire. He single-handedly saved the lives of 50 to 100 wounded men in an area called the Maida Escarpment, better known as Hacksaw Ridge. Doss was wounded 4 times during the engagement, which lasted for several days. At one point, a grenade landed by him near the men he was working on, and he kicked it away just in time, and he was later found to have 17 pieces of shrapnel in his legs. His final wound was from a bullet which fractured his left arm, after which he crawled back to the lines and, while waiting for help himself, assisted other wounded soldiers. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for his feats on Hacksaw Ridge, receiving that from President Harry S. Truman on October 12, 1945. If you ever get a chance to read his Medal of Honor award listing, do it. It's nothing short of incredible. He was the only Medal of Honor recipient that was a conscientious objector. Doss married Dorothy Pauline Shute on August 17, 1942, before all of that happened, and they had one son, Desmond Tommy Doss Jr., born in 1946. Unfortunately, Dorothy was killed in a car accident in 1991, but Desmond remarried in 1993 to a woman named Frances May Duman. After the war, Desmond had wanted to return to carpentry, but the wounds to his left arm and the other wounds, plus the fact that he had contracted tuberculosis while in Leyte and had to undergo treatment for 5.5 years, made it impossible for him to return to carpentry. When he was discharged from the hospital in 1951, he was 90% disabled. He paid a price. Desmond Doss died on March 23, 2006, at the age of 87. His second wife, Frances, wrote a book about him. It says there, Desmond Doss, Conscientious Objector. And Mel Gibson produced the film, of course, Hacksaw Ridge, about his military service in 2016. Now, this man also lived his faith. And, of course, you can't talk about Memorial Day without talking about sacrifice, and the ultimate sacrifice for many. We're coming up to Memorial Day. I want to acknowledge and honor the memory of those that did not return from the war. I believe Pastor Phil has told this story before, but it's good to remember the sacrifices of our Christian brothers. 4 men gave their lives to save others as they served the other men that they served with during a voyage across the Atlantic Ocean during World War II. These 4 men were all chaplains in the United States Army, and all were lieutenants, fairly low rank, low officer rank. They were George L. Fox, a Methodist minister, John P. Washington, a Catholic priest, Clark V. Poling, a Dutch Reformed minister, and Alexander D. Good, a Jewish rabbi. They were traveling with the troops that they served with aboard the U.S. Army Transport Dorchester, traveling from Newfoundland to Greenland on their way to the European theater to serve. The Dorchester departed Newfoundland on January 29, 1943, and by the evening of February 2nd, it had become apparent to the ship's captain and crew that they were being stalked by a German submarine. The passengers, all U.S. troops, were told to sleep with their clothes on with their life jackets as a precaution. The 4 chaplains had been preparing a talent show for the men aboard, but with the news of the U-boat stalking them, they canceled that plan, and the 4 chaplains instead had a party to try and calm the nerves of the passengers, the soldiers. The party ended with the chaplains meeting with individuals, and at one point a mass was held as well. Just after midnight on February 3rd, the passengers and crew started to think that they had eluded the danger, but the German U-boat U-233 was preparing to attack. Just before 1 a.m., a torpedo slammed into the Dorchester, and several men were killed instantly. Confusion ensued, and the people rushed to the deck planning to take to the lifeboats. However, some of the lifeboats were encased in ice from the sea crossing in winter, and other boats could not be launched due to the list, that is the tilt of the ship after the torpedo hit. The 4 chaplains did their best to calm the men on the ship as it was sinking, and at least one of them gave his warm gloves to someone saying, "Oh, I have another pair," which he didn't. The 4 men helped with the distribution of the life jackets until there were no more, and then each of them gave up their own life jackets to other men. When the ship sank, the 4 chaplains succumbed to the icy waters, along with 668 others of the 900 people on board the Dorchester. They also lived their faith right up till the end. As it is said, "Greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends." So tomorrow, as we commemorate those heroes, let us think about the ones that never made it home. They gave their lives in service to their country, our country, giving, as Abraham Lincoln once said, the last full measure of devotion. May we always honor those who served their country and their God. Now, I have a little video tacked on here, and sometimes it moves me to tears. So, as they say in the military, Dave, be ready to pull me out of the chair and take over if I don't make it, just in case.
On that bright summer's day, found a letter from her son in a war far away. He spoke of the weather and the friends that he made. Said, I've been thinking about that and the life that he had. That's why I'm here today. Then in the you are what I'm fighting for. It was the first of his letters from war. She started writing, you're good and you're brave. What a father that you'll be someday. Make it whole, make it safe. She wrote every night as she prayed. And late in December, honey, she'll not forget. Oh, her tears stained the paper with every word that she read. It said, I was upon a hill, I was out there alone when the shots all rang out. The bombs were exploding. That's when I saw him. He came back for me. Oh, he was captured. A man set me free. That man was your son. He asked me to write to you. I told him I would. Oh, I swore. It was the last of the letters from war. And she prayed he was living, kept on believing, and wrote every night just to say, you are good and you're brave. What a father that you'll be someday. Make it whole, make it safe. So she kept writing each day. And then 2 years later, autumn leaves all around. A car rolled in the driveway and she fell to the ground. And down stepped the captain where her boy used to stand. He said, Mom, I'm following orders from all of your letters, and I've come home again. He ran into her, dropped all his bags on the floor, holding all of her letters from war. Make it whole, make it whole. Make it
Whew. I love the part where the letter says, paraphrasing a little, I was out there and that's when I saw him. A man. A man came back for me, and though he was captured, that man set me free. That man was your son. God did that for us. He sent a man to brave the enemy's fire. He came back for us. Sorry. He set us free. That man was his son. Whew. Stoic Viking, right? Whew. So this week, spend some time with the people that matter most. Take time to be thankful for the sacrifices that so many have had to face for our freedom. Look for ways that you can serve your fellow human beings. And remember God's sacrificial love for each of you.